All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. In today's episode, we are going to be showing you 8 things that you can do as a battlefield commander to advance from a very new and disorganized state to a successful commander. All right, friends, welcome back again to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. This YouTube channel is dedicated to all things Bannerlord related, but especially advanced battlefield command and tactics. In today's episode, we are going to basically show newer commanders, newer field commanders, especially 8 vital things that you can do as a battlefield commander that will make you incrementally better, especially if you follow these 8 things. In each battle you're fighting, right? These are very basic concepts, but I think they're sort of missed by a lot of the people that are out there playing. Part of the reason is that the game dynamics don't necessarily work out like you would imagine they would in real life. We'll talk about that dynamic with archers and cavalry a little bit. And what we're essentially going to do here is show a sequence of about 6 battles where you implement and add these ideas to your battlefield strategy and tactics. And as that happens, I expect the success of this encounter to increase as we go along. Now, a little bit about this encounter first. We are going to be playing as the Sturgian faction against the Empire. Now, we've set up both sides to have all of their infantry except their recruits, and all of their archers, all of their cavalry, etc. And we've given both sides one of the minor tier clans because this is somewhat realistic to what you will have in the game, right? The Sturgians have the Wreckers, and these guys have the Eleftheroii, or whatever they're fucking called. All right, so both sides have roughly equal strength troops, but what we're going to do here is we're going to give the Empire 10% more troops. And just to kind of show you what this looks like, and by the way, we're going to be using the RTS mod, so this is not going to take 2 hours. I've got my army here, and all I'm going to do is tell these guys to F1, F3, right? This famous supposedly good strategy here, right? A lot of guys play this and then they run around with their character on the battlefield and hope for success. Well, so we're going to actually show you the initial start of this battle here. So as you can see, we're outnumbered by 10%, and we've sent the Sturgians into charge using this F1, F3. Now, of course, if you're watching this, you know that I believe that this is a failed strategy, that this is not going to consistently bring you success. And I think almost as importantly, you will derive very little sense of accomplishment from this tactic, right? If you're using F1, F3, it's a little bit like paying somebody to garden for you and then going out there and being like, look how awesome our garden is, or paying somebody to do something for you in life where they then get that sense of accomplishment and you miss that, right? That's part of the reason that people in our country and in a lot of capitalistic countries aren't very happy, because they no longer accomplish a full task anymore, right? They have somebody else doing it for them. And the main purpose of this first little 30-second interlude here, besides wandering a little bit into my philosophy on life, is to show you that without tactics, this Sturgian force loses, right? You can see I will not play these battles out to the very end, but at this stage, anybody with any idea of what's going on here knows that the Sturgian force is lost, right? So we will reset this now, and we will start back to this stage. And what we're effectively going to do is make subtle changes each time to this battlefield, to this result. We're going to effectively be playing the same battle over and over again. This is completely a tutorial. This is not going to be the most exhilarating tactics, exhilarating cinematic battle screen, but we're going to be essentially showing you that tactics are important. Now, the very first thing I'm going to do in this next battle is essentially let the enemy come to us. And I know that's a very simple concept, but all we're doing in this second example of this is we're going to let the enemy come to us, right? In this circumstance, we were the defensive of the 2 parties, and that's an important part of Bannerlord. In other words, this simulates where you're out in the battlefield wandering around your campaign map, and the enemy attacks you. Under those circumstances, you can see my characters down here doing the whirly gig as I move the RTS mod around. Under those circumstances, the enemy is required to come to you. And what I mean by that is if you attack the enemy, theoretically on the battlefield, you have to come to them. You may see them set up on the edge of the map or something like that. And of course, that's going to change the dynamics of this battle. So in this battle, they're forced to come to us. And unlike that first battle where we just had them F1, F3, we are now waiting the enemy out, right? We are basically saying, okay, enemy, you're the one that attacked us. You must come to us, and we're hoping for a better result. Now, I'm also going to use some very basic formational tactics here, right? We have the Sturgians in their standard shield wall. These guys are all holding their shields up. The same thing with the cavalry, right? We're basically taking the brunt of the enemy's assault from their archers, and we're having a little volley exchange here. Now, like I said before, we're going to wait for the enemy to come to us. Although at this stage, I'm perfectly okay with you attacking, with you saying, okay, let's have the cavalry charge and let's have the infantry charge, right? In that first battle, if you remember, of course, we got crushed. We'll see if the results are any different where we play what I would consider a more practical strategy against the Sturgians. Now our archers are back there doing a pretty good job, and they're untouched. Meanwhile, our cav and archers here or excuse me, our cav and infantry here is engaged in the main scrum and trying to bore their way through this force of the Empire. I guess they're sort of simulating the Northern Empire because they have this pink color. It's a closer battle, right? The first battle, I think the Northern Empire, or we'll just say the Empire forces. I want to say they had 120 forces left at the end of the battle, and we lost, right? The Sturgian force lost, and as you can see in this battle, and I'm actually going to stop it right about here. It's already closer, right? Just by having the enemy come to us and by leaving our archers back in this defensive position, this battle now is already closer than that first battle. Even though again we were outnumbered, right? We're starting to lose, but still much closer than that first result, where frankly we had our asses kicked. All right, so in this next one, we're going to make one very simple but very important change. We're going to increase the amount of archers. Now, a lot of people are very tempted, Sturgia with these badasses and shields, and everybody wants to get in there and swing their two-handed axe and shit. That's great. Sturgia does have good infantry compared to a lot of the other kingdoms, but in Bannerlord, at least at the time of the making of this episode, archers are very powerful. You want to have at least a comparable amount of archers to infantry. I'm just using this little slider bar to simulate in this battle that we have more archers than we did in the last one. If you remember right, we had something like 22, and this is a percentage. These numbers here are percentage of the total army. So this would mean we have 66 archers and so forth. What I'm going to do here is dramatically increase the amount of archers we have and slightly decrease the amount of cav and infantry. So you can actually see in this battle we now have fully 40% of our army is archers. 20 we'll do 27, 28% is here I can lock these numbers off, is cav, and we'll do less infantry. So less infantry, more archers, and a little bit less cav than that first battle. And again, we're going to use virtually the same strategy, and I suspect this will be the first one of these battles where we win. And again, that might be strange to you, that might not make sense to you, but this is how the game dynamics work. The bottom line is that archers are very powerful in Bannerlord. As of the shooting of this I'm on 1.28, right? So if you're anywhere near that version, I'm on actually the beta, then you should see sort of similar results to what we're going to see here. Again, with the rest of these battles, we're going to use this overhead mod. Again, I'm trying to make these about a 20-minute episode, right? So we're speeding it along. We're on the maximum speed here using the RTS mod. We're playing at 300 times, excuse me, we're playing at 3 times the normal speed of battle. And we'll see how we do here now with more archers. Now, I talk about formations extensively in other episodes. Not going to go into it in super deep detail here. Generally, though, one of the best formations to be in is in shield wall, right? You put these guys in shield wall, they hold their shields up, and that gives you highly defensible units when the enemy's shooting at you, right? Now, it doesn't make you impervious, but obviously it makes you a lot more able to handle the enemy arrows that are coming in. And of course, we have our archers behind our infantry. That way our archers aren't getting shot to start with, if you put the archers out front, they will definitely be getting pounded by the enemy. Right? That's just a little bonus component of this. That's something that you should be doing, right? It's very basic, and I understand this entire episode, some of you guys might have already X'd out because these are very basic principles, but I want to show these just in case there are relatively newer players that are still benefiting from this. Now, here come their troops, right? Their infantry's charging, their cav over here is fighting our cav, and now as their infantry attacks, we're going to charge with our infantry. Now, you notice some of these dipshits ran backwards. That's because they're literally chasing the cavalry behind them. So our infantry line meets theirs, but vitally, most of these archers here, this 140 guys, is skewering the enemy, shooting them to pieces. Now we're going to speed this up again because I don't want these episodes to take forever. Just hit that little button here and this episode will start to breeze by. I will also use this menu a lot, and this is basically the status menu. You don't actually need to see what's going on sometimes so much in these simulations. There's guys shooting each other and stabbing each other. What you need to see is that number there. That's the first number on the top left column for each unit. The attacking army has 86, 85, it's going down, and the defending army has 194, 193. That's how many troops we have left. And as you can see from this battle, we are victorious, even though we're outnumbered by 10%, even though with this same setup, the same map, very similar circumstances, we lost the first battle and might have lost the second battle. By simply adding more archers here, we are now victorious. In fact, we're going to be victorious by a significant margin. I can't speed it up any faster. I think this is the fastest speed it goes. Our cavalry's out here running down the enemy forces, and there you have it. The enemy's fleeing, you have won the battle. 172 troops, right? This is a dramatic success. Over half of our troops survived, right? So if you just do this one change, in other words, if you use your units like I did here defensively until the enemy gets close and then attacks, and try to have more archers in your army, even if you're playing with the ferocious Sturgian infantry, you will have more success, right? The troops are down there roaring, you win, right? You're victorious. All right, so we want to use more archers, right? Same as the last battle, we're going to use more archers again in this battle, but this time we're going to put a little wrinkle into this, right? We are basically going to split our archers into two divisions, and I'm going to show you the reason of why that's beneficial. First, we will use one division, one big glob of archers here. We're giving the enemy a good amount of infantry to deal with it, and then we are going to effectively split our archers and see what the results look like. Again, like all the other battles here, obviously we're outnumbered by 10%. So we'll take our infantry here, put them out in the front, and our archers here kind of towards the back, and we'll put them in a big glob, and we'll see how we can do here. Now, I think we're going to do better with our archers split up here. I think this will be a good example of how, if you have one big archer division, what happens ultimately is these guys become vulnerable. Because they're all together, as the enemy comes in, this becomes a bit of a problem for you. So infantry there, cav there, they're both in shield walls, and the enemy bores in again. The archers start firing away at the horse archers. And again, the main reason I'm suggesting you use archers in multiple divisions is a relatively simple concept. It's the same concept as like a first-person shooter, how you and your friend will run and attack, some location, and you guys want to be in a little different locations, right? But that's because you guys give covering fire to each other, right? Your archers are, or in this case, a first-person shooter, if one guy's being attacked, maybe the other guy has a better angle on the enemy, and they can attack anybody that's attacking your friend, right? So you're using angles on the enemy, and you're giving cover fire, right? It's a very simple military term, but I know a lot of people in Bannerlord still use one archer division, and I'm hoping this shows you the benefit of two. Now, they're being kind of mauled. The archers are being kind of ran over by heavy cav, by infantry, and that's because they're all together. In fact, this is a pretty close battle. Even though I just showed you that more archers will help you be successful in Bannerlord, in this instance here, it's not. Because partly because our units were too close together as well. That's another very simple thing, is making sure your archers have a little bit of distance and the right spread from this enemy. But I'm actually going to stop this simulation. As you can see, the Sturgians have lost this battle. Right now, we will use the exact same configuration where the enemy has this larger amount of infantry. And by the way, you may face this, right? You may face, in fact, you will face this, where the enemy has a large amount of infantry, and you're wondering, well, what happens if I have a lot of archers? Aren't I vulnerable to an enemy with a lot of infantry, right? Because they're going to be coming up in shield wall. These guys will be defensive. They're going to be aware of your archers, and they will try to counter it with the shield wall. So what we're going to do here is the exact same setting, and we're just going to have two different archer divisions, right? So I want this little bit of elevation over here. So what I'm actually going to do is have our units kind of start way over here, different from the starting block, and we're going to split our archers. Now, I like to use the 4th and 5th Corps just because that's what I do in my campaign. However you set your units up, I'd recommend you do it the same every time. That way your brain doesn't have to think a lot in the middle of battle. This game's already complicated enough. The last thing you need, for sure, is to have to try to remember where the fuck your units are. Oh, wait, I put those archers there or those archers there. If you do a lot of that, you're definitely going to have a harder time with Bannerlord. Now, I'm also going to make a little change here. We're going to have the cav defending this side over here and the infantry defending there. And I might have to slow this down here. I think I might have, let's slow it down just a bit here. I don't even have time to set up our units. All right, so infantry and a shield wall. In fact, we're gonna configure where these guys are a little bit more accurate. I'm using the infantry here, of course, to protect those archers, right? The cav right here is pretty clearly protecting these archers. They're in a big long shield wall, and the archers over here are being protected by a shield wall infantry line. Now, as the enemy comes up, right, we are going to now charge them with our cavalry and charge them with our infantry, right? We don't want the enemy really getting deep into our archers, and so we're attacking them to sort of eat up some of their troops that might ordinarily get to our archers. Now, you notice their infantry line just reached these archers, and it's going to start to cause major damage to these guys, right? In fact, they're getting routed pretty bad. It's actually pretty ugly for them, but look at over here. Because we split our archers, these guys are like, well, so sorry Dale and those guys got killed, but the rest of us are having a fucking ball over here. Nobody's attacking us. And while the enemy cav sort of fights it out with our cav and infantry, these guys are literally having a fucking time of their life, right? There's nobody attacking them, and they're firing more or less unimpeded at the enemy. Meanwhile, your cavalry is still cycle charging here, really fucking with the enemy infantry. And again, these archers are doing major damage. In fact, if you look at this death spam, a lot of it, if not most of it, is archers getting kills, right? Now, these archers are actually out of arrows at this stage. This is something that will happen to you. This little white bar, by the way, indicates how much ammo they have. And these guys, these archers now, should be told to charge because the infantry is fighting it out with the cav, and the guys that don't have arrows will literally just stand there. We want them charging, and what happens is the guys that still have arrows will shoot, but the guys that don't fucking yell and scream and try to make a bunch of noise to intimidate the enemy, and they charge, right? They're weak still, they're archers, but at least they're doing something. And between your cavalry attacking them, your archers shooting them, and the guys that are charging with their little tiny pathetic axe, your guys are at least doing some damage. Now you see the enemy archers here are starting to rout, they're starting to fall back. So the very same battle where we just lost, we split our archers up and we've devastated the enemy, or at least we've defeated the enemy. Now, there are other enormous advantages to having multiple archer wings, and I will cover that in the next episode like this, which is going to be called something to the effect of 8 intermediate skills that will help you win as a battlefield commander, right? This is the novice or beginner level. We're victorious here. This is the novice level where it's fairly simple concepts, and we will have an entire episode like this that's a lot more complicated. All right, we're going to do 2 more different things here. The first one we're going to do is we're going to use elevation, and we're also going to use cav defensively. Actually, I'm sorry, we already used cav defensively. We're going to use infantry in a square here in this battle, right? So the exact same configuration. In fact, I'm going to sort of change them to a somewhat normal configuration of units. And what we're going to do in this battle here is we're going to use infantry in a square. This is a very powerful and very simple tactic. But it's something that a lot of new commanders are probably either not thinking of, didn't even know existed, and therefore they're not taking advantage of it. Now we're going to use elevation, right? Anytime you have elevation, you want to use it, just like Anakin in Star Wars, right? If you have the capacity to take the high ground and keep the high ground, you usually want it, right? And there are circumstances where it's better to not take the high ground, but I'm not going to cover that today. All right, so we've got the 4th and 5th archers. Again, we will split them, not a huge distance because we want these guys to be able to shoot and support each other. And we're going to have the infantry. We're actually going to divide the infantry into 2 divisions. And this might seem strange as well, but it's a fairly simple concept once you see it in the battlefield. We're going to have 2 divisions. The 1st and 2nd is now infantry. If you zoom in, right, we've got these 2 divisions. And what we're going to do is we're going to use 1 division in a square, and that's F2, F5. These commands will become more and more comfortable to you, and the other division in a shield wall, right? And so it basically looks like this. The square is there, and the shield wall, in fact, we'll put the square right there, and the shield wall is kind of behind them, protecting a little bit these guys from this side, right? These archers from that side. And what you're going to see is we're actually going to charge this 2nd division on that square. So when the enemy infantry attacks that square, we will then charge them with cav. They'll be, of course, getting shot with archers, etc. And this strategy, as you'll see, is highly, highly effective. This is probably one of the most simple but devastating things you can do as a battlefield commander. Now, these archers have shit line of sight. I don't know if you can actually see that. The hill is slightly crusted there, so they don't have good line of sight. So even though I'm using 2 archer divisions, we're going to use them in a little unusual manner here. I'm going to put the 4th right here, and I'm going to put the 5th slightly askew up this hill. Now, when I zoom in here, again, you want to make sure they have line of sight. It's actually not very good, right? The line of sight is vital for your archers, and you as the battlefield commander, you're in charge of this. You can put these guys way the fuck back here where they can't see shit because there's rocks and trees and shit in their way. You always want to get down before a battlefield and say, okay, this actually is better because now they're sort of protected by this ridge over here and they're shooting down. That's much better for their line of sight. So just configuring my men a little bit. In fact, we're at the edge of the battlefield to start. We're going to move these units once the battlefield starts. All right, so we'll start. We'll use this F10 to use the blimp mode again so you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm gonna slow this down just a bit here in the initial stages while we set up our defenses. Now, you have this time in most battles, right? You have a good 30 seconds before the actual battle starts where you have time to move your units around like this. There are rare occasions where you just don't have this time, but most of the time you will have a good amount of time to set up your units as they come in. Now I'm going to run this one a little bit slower as this battle sort of goes on. We're gonna slow things down just a touch. The other thing I want to point out too is the javelin throwers here in the Sturgian army. I don't know how many there are in here, but some of these guys have javelins, and we want them to be close to the enemy as they come in to attack our square. So I'm actually going to use normal speed here, and we'll move this cav in kind of so that it's overlooking this square. What I mean by overlooking it is anybody in here, let's see if we can find one. Anybody in here, okay, these guys that have a javelin, you see those things on his back there. As the enemy gets close to our square, those guys will start using those javelins. Even though they're in shield wall, they'll say, hey, I can hit these fucks. In fact, look at this guy. He's like trying to throw it behind him. These guys will then throw their javelins, and notice what the enemy's doing, right? They are attacking that square, which is precisely what we want. Now, you can start to move this around. I'm just going to move it a little bit today to show you that, and these guys will try to maintain in a square, right? They'll do a decent job of it. Now, the enemy's attacking our square, and so we're going to attack with our other units. The other infantry unit and that cav unit now get told to charge, because we're hoping the enemy's distracted by our square and that these other infantry groups can run in and sort of attack the enemy that's distracted, right? This is like a little magic trick, right? You're taking the attention from the enemy in some location, or in this case, taking the attention of your audience in a magic trick, and then while that's happening, you pull off the trick and they're looking somewhere else and they don't actually see what's happening. The enemy was focused on our square here. The next thing they knew, they're getting berserked by cavalry and attacked by other infantry divisions. All the while, look at our archers, right? This is why these tactics setups are so important. These archers are literally free and firing away unimpeded. There's nobody attacking them. And at some point here, our infantry divisions here might wear out, but our square is actually still holding out, right? The square is still surviving. And the enemy's trying to deal with that while they're being shot with 1,000 arrows. Now these guys, it looks like they finally routed, right? And the enemy's coming in. So this would be a good opportunity to show you the advantage of multiple divisions. The enemy, look who they're charging. Okay, so they're charging these archers over here. And while they're charging those archers over here, these archers over here are shooting the shit out of them. Now, a few of their units sort of headed for both. And that's a thing. That'll happen, right? The enemy's not stupid enough just to completely ignore your units, at least not in every battle. But what's happened now with the rest of the battle is obviously very good for our success, right? It looks like our cav caused their archers to rout, and our forces here obviously are highly successful. So even though we're outnumbered, by adding in these little elements, by adding in a square, you get this highly successful result. All right, so next we're going to cover banners in Bannerlord. And of course, Bannerlord, it should tell you all you need to know, right? These guys run around the battlefield and they will carry a banner, but you have control of how it works before the battle. Now you can see there's all different types of banners, and we're going to show you several different types. My main character, I typically like a banner that does reduced taken ranged attack damage, because enemy archers obviously are a major threat to my units. As you're riding around the battlefield or running around, you're still going to be getting shot a lot, and you're going to deal with a lot of different threats. These banners, of course, are obtainable as loot. They can be obtained at tournaments, all kinds of different ways. And there's 3 different types or 3 different powers of banners, right? It's basically 3 different tiers. They start off with the bonuses at like 5 or 10%, and then they work their way all the way up to 15% or 30% for specialized banners. As you can see here in our late game campaign, we have a huge amount of banners. Now, some of the banners are honestly worthless. Decreased taken shield damage is fucking worthless. Just trust me, as a highly experienced veteran, discard these banners, sell them. You will not need that banner. Another banner that's pretty worthless, at least in the later stage, has to do with morale. Decreased morale shock, 30%. This is worthless once you're a good commander. Now, early in the campaign, you might benefit from having decreased morale shock, but later in a campaign, if you guys are in a late game campaign, you're still using the decreased morale shock, I don't think it's valuable, right? You're very rarely going to have units breaking in a moderate to late game campaign, and so just discard those battles outright. Okay, so I'm going to show you the pre-battle setup here from a recent battle I have, and I'm going to essentially show you and talk to you for a few minutes about my philosophies on banners. Now, there's all these other banners do have a use, and it depends on how you use your units, right? If you have an infantry division, generally you don't want things like increased troop movement speed of 30%. You can see she's got good stats. The stats, of course, transfer. Your captain perks, the person who's in charge of that division, you can see athletics and whatnot, that all transfers to that division, as do the banner bonuses. Now, your infantry division, you want a banner that benefits infantry, right? He's got decreased taken melee attack damage. That means that as the enemy attacks him, we get all of these bonuses, and that banner means that they're taking 15% less damage. That is optimal, right? If you have a defensive square, you obviously want them taking less melee damage. Now, this gal here, increased troop movement speed. If you had a shock division, and this is a bit of a more of an advanced strategy, you would use increased troop movement speed. That way these guys with two-handed weapons can quickly get into battle, right? You don't want these guys taking a long time to get into battle, and so if you have shock troops like this, there's actually not any in here because of the campaign I'm in, but if you have two-handed weapon guys with pole arms or axes or whatever, increased troop movement speed is very powerful. And you might set up that kind of commander with that unit. Now, I typically like speed on archers as well, so I will use increased troop movement speed on archers. That way, if they're being attacked by melee, big infantry divisions running up to your archers, you can simply have them move back and they will outrun the infantry. Now, other banners that I like, of course, if I'm using archers, it might be decreased taken range attack damage because they're shooting and being shot by the enemy, right? So this character right here, in fact, Gweth, is one of my main captains that I'll use for an archer division because her perks and her banners line up nicely. All right, so what else? So the 4th, 5th division, right? You've got all these different archers here, and if you give them increased movement, they can evade the enemy. You can also give these units things like increased ranged accuracy, right? It's never a bad thing for your archers to be more accurate. There's also a banner that does increased damage from ranged attacks. I've never done testing to determine which is better, having better accuracy or more damage, but I suspect they roughly cancel each other out. Again, you can see this character here has a ton of perks that benefit archers and increased troop movement speed. That 30%, that means they're going to be cruising around the battlefield. That's enormously valuable for your archers, right? Even if they're being attacked currently by the infantry, they can run away and not be chased down by the infantry. Now, of course, your enemy might have increased troop movement speed for the infantry, and then in which case you might be in trouble. That's usually not the case, though. All right, so Zuvan, this is my main character. Look at his perks, right? And again, he has the banner decreased taken ranged attack damage. Generally speaking, you want your captains with the most amount of perks that apply to that kind of unit leading that unit, right? If you have a really powerful cav officer like Zuvan, I want him leading a large cav division, an important unit. And again, so the second cav here, increased charge damage, right? That means that all of the spear knights in her division, these guys with the shield and spear, those guys are doing 30% more damage when they charge into the enemy. Charge is just F1, F3, right? When you have your cav division charge, they run up with their spear. Those guys are all doing more damage. Now I run my 3rd division as a defensive division, right? These guys are shield and spear, but they also have swords. And these guys I typically use in a square. We talked about a square briefly in that last component. So he, again, decreased taken melee attack damage from his banner, and they have all these perks, right? So he's a defensive commander. They have all these abilities to survive longer. He's got a shield, and he gives them decreased taken melee attack damage because of the banner he has. Right, you really want to specialize your units. All right, so now let's see, what else can I show you? The skirmisher division I have. A lot of these guys actually are archers in this portion of the campaign. Skirmishers, your guys with javelins. These guys here, I can actually configure this a little bit, but these guys here, again, decrease taken range attack damage, because a lot of times archers are shooting these guys, right? Decrease taken ranged attack damage actually is a really good perk overall for pretty much any unit. I can't actually think of a scenario where that's a useless banner. Now again, this guy's got a lot of perks that give javelin throwers advantage. Look, you can see plus throwing skill and plus all these things. All the units in his division benefit from that as long as he's alive. I believe, and I'm not certain, but I believe when he's knocked unconscious, you lose all of these bonuses. So decreased taken ranged attack damage for skirmishers, very valuable. A lot of times your skirmishers are going to be running up and throwing javelins. They might even be throwing javelins at archers as they move in, right? So you want to align these captains in a way that makes the most optimal sense. Now you see I have these low-level scrubs, this Edwin the Ragged, and these guys have shitty-ass banners, but they have things like decreased ranged attack damage, or decreased ranged accuracy penalties. I would prefer decreased taken ranged attack damage because you're suffering less damage, and obviously if your units are upright, they're still shooting. But those other banners, the decreased taken or decreased accuracy banners, do have some merit in some circumstances. All right, so we'll wrap this episode up here. Hopefully these 8 things help you as a relatively new commander go out there and start to kick ass. Hopefully you see from the examples that even these small, subtle changes that we made a very significant difference in battle. I'm pretty confident they will for you as well. And I'm pretty confident if you follow these directions, if you follow this instructional tutorial, you will start to see more success on the battlefield in Bannerlord. Now we'll have another episode in a week or two where we start to cover more moderate tactics, things like flanking, things like the use of multiple squares, and we'll get a little deeper into the weeds of overall combat to try to help you guys continue to advance your combat skills. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more. Please like and comment. All that kind of stuff is good for the channel. I appreciate you fellas, and I will see you guys next time.